Hello, welcome to Stories in Time. My name is Ellouise Schoettler. I'm a storyteller here to tell you a story. I remember it so vividly, it's hard for me to believe that it was 1954 when I went into the office to talk to the counselor who was going to advise me for graduation and what I should plan to do when I graduated from high school. There was only about 6 months left before I would be a gone girl, from what was going on in the senior class. She asked me what I planned to do. I had no plans. Why would I want plans? I was happy right here where I was. What was she thinking? And she made it very clear that I better get busy. You have options. You just have to decide what you want to do with them. You could go to college and be a teacher. Well, I knew that I didn't want to do that. And I knew that my parents couldn't afford for me to do that. There's a nursing school. There are 3 in Charlotte, actually, and they would give you a good education to be a very fine nurse. I tucked that back behind my eyes and didn't say anything. Or you could be a librarian, or you could go to secretarial school. What are you thinking about now, Ellouise? I'll be a nurse. I was startled. I'd never thought about being a nurse in my whole life. I'll be a nurse. I'll go to Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, and I will be a nurse. She looked so impressed when I saw that I knew I would have to stick with that idea and stay with it until I made it to Baltimore and became a nurse. Now, the truth of the whole story is I was 18 years old, and I was trying to find what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, and I wasn't quite sure. But when September came, my suitcases were packed, and my parents took me to the train, the Southerner, that was going to ride all night from Charlotte to Baltimore, and I was starting my new life. I was going to be a nurse at Hopkins Hospital. I was scared. I was away from home. I didn't know what was going on up there. I was excited. It was a whole new world to go out. I packed up, took my suitcases into the nurse's home when we got there, and set out my clothes, made it neat, was ready to go. Monday, we met all as a classroom, as our classmates. And that's how it started. Now, it wasn't like going to college, and it wasn't like anything else I had done. The group that had just arrived wore a hideous brown lab coat because we were newbies. And we went to class mostly, and then we went on the wards sometimes for the first 4 months until we were trained enough to go on the ward. And we had to have a chance to meet each other and to talk. I liked those girls so much. We were on a long hall. My room was at the end of the hall, and it was right across the hall from the steps. I was on the 2nd floor, and the steps had a light on it 24 hours a day so that you could see where you were going and you wouldn't pitch down those steps and break your neck. But it was a little lonely down at the end of the hall. We didn't have a telephone. You had a squawk box on the wall that just called out your name. And then you went running down the hall and you got on the phone. One afternoon, I was out walking around, talking to people, and Betty, who was also from North Carolina, came up and said, Ellouise, the boy that I've been going out with, well, he's not a boy, he's really a man, he's a medical student. And I said, yeah. And they're going to a party next Saturday, and his roommate doesn't have a date. Would you like to go? You can go with me and George, and, his name is Jim. And I said, well, why not? So the next Saturday, I put on my red jumper. I like to wear red. I feel good when I'm wearing red. And when my squawk box rang, I went downstairs. Over against the wall at the front door, Betty was there with what must have been her guy, and there was another guy standing there with her and him. Tall, crew cut, beige pants, a cashmere sweater. He was adorable. That was going to be my date. Well, we began to date. We got along fine. We saw each other regularly. And one night we went out and he met me late for a coffee date in the hospital. He was studying. He was going to come down for an hour, and then I'd go back to the nurse's home and I could settle in for the night. And we talked, and it was always so good, I thought, to be with Jim. That was his name, Jim. Jim Schoettler, by the way, was his name. So I came back to the room, and before I had come out, I had decided that I wanted to wear my red jumper. I wanted to feel good when I was here. I looked through my closet, and I couldn't find it anywhere. I walked down my hallway and stuck my head in all the doors where somebody was home and said, has anybody seen my red jumper? It's not in my closet. And Mickey said to me, Ellouise, I think that Dottie is wearing that dress. She was dating somebody new tonight. She took it without asking me, and I was angry at her. I sat down with Jim, and we had our visit. Came back, I went to bed. I heard noise outside my door, and the door turned and the pushed open, and at that door stood Dottie. Dottie was still wearing my red dress. It was a jumper. But she looked dreadful. Her hair was wet and stringy. Her face was swollen from crying. And she was so upset. Dottie, what's the matter with you? Ellouise. And she came into the room and she was still crying. She said, Ellouise, I think I've ruined your dress. Your favorite dress. I think I've ruined it. That's not important. What happened? Why are you so upset? I was in an accident. I was out on a date, and the driver and his date were in the front seat, and I was sitting in the back seat. I was sitting behind the driver, and with my date on the other side, and he was sitting behind this girl that was in the front seat, and they hit something. It was raining. There was leaves all over the ground. And he slid, and I don't know what they hit, but they hit something, and we all burst forward. You know, you weren't tied down in those seats. And when I came to, I looked up there, and the girl that was in the front seat was bleeding. She was bleeding. What was I going to do? I'm in school to learn how to help people when they're bleeding, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't have anything to do with. And so I leaned across the seat and reached down, and I touched her, and she was hot and had liquid all over. And I leaned over closer. It was blood. There was blood everywhere. Blood. And I got out of the car and ran around to the other side. The young man that was driving ran off somewhere to find a telephone to call for an ambulance and to call the police. We needed help. And I opened the door and she fell toward me. And she looked up. Help me, she said. And then I reached down. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to help her. And her lights in her eyes went out. And I watched her as she died. About 5 minutes later, we heard the siren on the ambulance as it was running toward us. Finally, there was going to be somebody that would be there to help us. And now here I am to tell you about it. I came back. They brought us back to the hospital with her. And we had to answer questions and talk about what had happened. And when the police had finished, they brought me back to the hospital here, to the nurse's home. And I've come to you first to tell you I'm so sorry. I've ruined your dress. The next morning, her parents came down from Massachusetts to pick her up and take her home for a little visit. We were all stunned by what had happened because we all loved Dottie. She had a wonderful personality. She was laughing and happy and kind and one of those that you just want to love up. She's so nice and kind-hearted. She came back several weeks later, quiet and withdrawn. And over the next few months, she gradually joined back more herself. I sort of slipped away from her because Jim and I were very much in love, and we started talking about getting married. And we would go to North Carolina and get married at Christmas after a year and a half of going together. So I decided that I would drop out of nursing. And I came back to Baltimore with Jim to an apartment and became his wife and got a lab job, and we were going along. And then we moved wherever he had to be in school or his job took him. And I didn't see Dottie again. I didn't see her. But when we moved to the Washington area, my youngest baby, my fourth child, died. And I knew that Dottie lived in this area, but I didn't think about her really until she called me. And she said, Ellouise, I'm so sorry. I went to see your little girl yesterday. I'm sorry you weren't there when I got there. She's so beautiful. I'm so sorry. She's a beautiful little girl. When you have a friend like that, you don't forget them. And every time, I never saw that jumper again, and it didn't matter. Everything that was with it, friendship and caring and love. Love for a friend, another mother who understood the loss. That was really all that I needed, and she was just the right person to bring it to you. These are the stories that enrich our lives, aren't they? And they give us people that we'll have with us forever. Thank you for coming. I hope you'll come back.